my son when I run out of the room, saying that's mine. He was diagnosed with autism when he was late 3, early 4. And whereas this is very much my personal journey with dealing with autism, it is a pretty common thread for those who, the parents of children with autism. I don't want to get into a lot of like the statistics and data, but I do feel I'd be remiss to not mention this. The CDC has found that 1 in 68 school-aged children are diagnosed with autism now. That's up from 2 years ago, which was 1 in 88. More boys, 1 in 42 is the average.
1 in how many?
1 in 42 boys,
Okay.
and 1 in 68 is school-aged children. It costs billions of dollars a year for America to educate and to help these kids try to rehabilitate society and figure out causes and the lost wages of parents of children with autism. There's undue stress for parents of autism. They found on the parental stress scale, parents of children with autism rated 4 times higher than the average parents. And it's not just because of the autism that has to do with missing work and the bureaucracy and dealing with schools, and it's just a bigger strain. When Kim was 3, he seemed fine. He was funny, he laughed, he ran around and played, he seemed like any other kid until he started going to daycare, until he started preschool. There he started losing his verbal ability. He started beating his head against things. He started screaming or making weird clicking noises or playing with his hands and drifting out of focus and just not able to relate to the other children his age. The last day he was there, they pulled me into a room with 12 people, and we all sat in a circle and they all introduced themselves. And they're like, we just wanted to let you know that as you go to your next school, what resources there are. So what are you talking about? They said, for your son's disability.
Oh.
I said, can we start over? I have no idea what you're talking about. So they started explaining to me about sensory disorder. And I said, well, I'm going through a divorce right now. He's very young. If I see this problem in the next school, I'll have you tested then. But I want to ask you one question. Has any of you met Kim? And the answer was no. Not a single one of those 12 people had anything to do with him. They had never been in a classroom with him. They had never shook his hand. But they were telling me that he had a disability. So I took him to the next school, and lo and behold, the same problems kept occurring. Instead of being able to tell us what he needed, he would just wail and until he got what he needed, because he couldn't say. He wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom by himself. He physically could not feel the urge to go number 2. He can't do it. It took 8 years to teach him how to feel the internal senses of I need to go to the bathroom so he can do it on his own. The day that happened. The thing about autism is everything has to be intentionally taught. They don't have the ability to just innately understand that when somebody makes this face, they're mad at you. Or when they do this, they don't want to be touched. You can't figure that out. People with autism tend to think not in words, but in pictures. So when you say, oh, so-and-so's blowing up my phone, Ken says, why would they do that? Because in his mind, he's saying, he's not saying someone really wants to contact me. Anyways, he was diagnosed through 2 different means, through both the education system and through a 2 boys. I had 4 brothers and 3 sisters. I pulled teeth and potty trained in some people's bed at night. So I thought I knew what I was doing. I had a lot of arrogance and a lot of I know everything kind of going into it, a lot of pride. I didn't know anything. When he was diagnosed, she pulled me into a room and said, after the tests that we performed and after the individual interviews with you and with him, I determined that he has high-functioning autism, Asperger's. I said, okay, so what do I do? She says, there's nothing to do. He has autism. He will always have autism. There is no cure. He will not get better. This is how it is. That floored me. I had done everything right. I did everything you're supposed to do. I thought I had gone above and beyond. But that kind of thing isn't in my control. I have no way of preventing this from happening. We don't even know why children are born with autism, why it's increasing. We think it has something to do with pesticides and chemicals, which is why it occurs more in people as they age. Older women are more likely to have children with autism. Yeah, it's definitely not from vaccines. I just want to go ahead and say that. Definitely not vaccinations. In fact, they found that German measles are more likely to cause autism than the vaccinations themselves. Well, I went through about 6 weeks of absolute depression and crying and misery, thinking, okay, well that's it. The rest of my life devoted to this one thing and making sure that my son can handle civilization. And, you know, at that time, his symptoms were so severe. I mean, he was screaming and running in circles at school. He wasn't able to be with normal kids. He just couldn't do it. One of my friends bucked me up, and he said, and I'm not going to say the exact words, he said, yeah, you're being a dumb bee. He's the same kid he's always been. Now you just have resources to help him. So, and you may not know this, but if you have a child on Medicaid and they have a disability, they give you a case manager. And tell you immediately, if I see any sign of neglect, I'm taking your kid. And they come into your home and inspect you and make sure you're doing everything you're supposed to do, the way you're supposed to be doing it. So there was a lot of stress on me and the realization that my son could be taken from me if my house isn't clean enough. It was a very terrorizing feeling. So I had therapists come into the house, and case managers come into the house. I had ABA therapy groups. I had parenting classes for myself on ABA therapy, and assertive parenting, and 1, 2, 3 magic, and all the things you could possibly think to do. I was lucky I had a lot of resources. And every year, he gets better. Every year. Now he hugs people, he asks me this morning, are you feeling okay? Because he kind of sensed that I was a little off. It's just huge. You know, he speaks very well with other people, he's very polite. It took work. It continues to take work. But me as a parent, dealing with this as he went from point A to point B, it was incredibly difficult to learn to be my own advocate, to learn to be his advocate, to give up that pride and that feeling of control, to learn humility, to learn to be able to ask for help. It was incredibly difficult. I mean, it still is. It's hard for me to say, I don't like what you did there. He's been suspended from school 8 times this last year. And in the school system, they count suspensions as unexcused absences. So after a few unexcused absences or suspensions, I get a letter in the mail saying I need to go to truancy court to prove that I'm not keeping him out maliciously as Simon Says, that someone's flickering the lights on and off, and there's the sound of static on the TV. And every time you mess up, you get in trouble. And they deal with that all day, every day. And they can't communicate unfilling the room because of this, because they don't know. They can't speak the same way that we speak. They can't explain things the same way that we can, because he thinks in pictures. It doesn't translate well. I mean, if he could take that picture and give it to us, then it would mean something, but he can't. So instead, he starts making click sounds. Yesterday we were at the zoo, and he was getting more and more like pulling away and dragging his feet, and he started going, which meant it's time to go to the bathroom. You can't just say, I have to go to the bathroom. But for people with autism, it's just more complicated for them. They have the same feelings and same drives, just with their inability to control themselves and their inability to understand social norms. 50% of children with autism have aggressive symptoms. So in school, they can hit other children, they can hit themselves, they can harm even adults, especially as they grow bigger. And it's incredibly important that we give the support as children so that as they get built bigger, they don't actually hurt anybody, including themselves. It's just a very frustrating experience, but it becomes so much easier with time as you relinquish that control and understand that my own micromanaging is part of the problem. I know that it's important for him to have respect with other adults, and therefore I have to step away. And me being constantly in tune with his emotions means that he can rely on that, and that other people aren't going to be able to do that, so he has to stand on his own 2 feet and learn to say yes. So, did anyone have questions about anything? Yes.
I was wondering, in my involvement with youth sports, I was wondering what kind of advice you get as a parent, or what kind of recommendations you get, because a lot of times we encounter kids that, but you don't know, and their parents sometimes come forward and tell you, here's what's up with my son or my daughter, and other times they don't, or maybe they haven't had a diagnosis yet or whatever. But I mean, what kind of advice do you get about, should you go tell the coach, or should you go talk to the people that you know your child's going to be around, or is it just like, well, I want them to be as good as possible, and I'm not going to belabor it? I mean, just kind of how do you handle that?
I always inform someone. I inform someone up front. I inform friends who are going to come over, or any potential dating partners, or any teachers, because autism is about prevention. You can't handle it after the episode has started. Trying to de-escalate a situation is so much more difficult than preventing. And with autism, most children respond very strongly to very firm, rigid rules. Like if they're having trouble understanding what their spot is, you put duct tape on the floor. This is your square. You stay in the square. That makes sense. That's a picture. And they like rules. Often they have very high sensitive gag reflexes. I'm puking on a daily basis over if they thought something kind of gross. If you make it a rule that you can't throw up at lunch, they won't do it. Because that's now internal and that's a rule. But you have to be explicit in those rules. You can't be like, oh, try to go to the bathroom now. You're like, go.
Be in the moment.
Well, it's sort of like the best practice that you've learned is you be open and you inform. You would go tell the coach. I mean, and I think there's like layers of this, or levels of this, right? And so.
Yeah, I think a lot of parents are embarrassed, or they're hoping that the kid will behave appropriately or be able to fit in enough. I mean, they put them in team sports because they're hoping to give them those social skills, really. But that's putting a lot of pressure on the coach and on the other kids to have to try to involve someone if they don't know how to behave around some person. It's unfortunately out of the realms of reasonable expectation. With kids like Kian, I tried team sports where he was like literally climbing on the coach's back and trying to hug him, and he kept having accidents on the field, and that's kind of distracting in a football game.
Right.
But yeah, I find honesty and welcoming is definitely the best policy.
What is magic 1, 2, 3?
You ever hear parents counting down? Hey, give me that 3.
Oh, okay.
1. They almost never get to 1.
Oh, I
The
see.
expectation that something's going to happen is enough to make it worse.
It's concrete.
I want this now, not yet.
Oh, I see. I thought it was an organization. But, I mean, it sounds like a good name for one to stop the acceleration or whatever. Because, yeah, if you're just right there with him and not trying to visualize, but just visualize. I think if you visualize what they're going through, you might be able to be on the same page. But I think I've worked with autistic children and didn't know it. Not
true.
many, but some.
It wasn't really understood or diagnosed until about the 60s.
Yeah.
So we're still kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
And just there's like a few telltales that are obvious. This thing and this thing and clicking and putting things in lines and making their faces and stuff. And you can see it. It's just more subtle.
And so the emotions just go directly to explosion instead of I'm getting mad, that kind of
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got a nephew that's got it, and it's really fascinating to behold. And I think it's a really great opportunity to just be with them. I really do. I know I preach about being in the moment all the time, and Beverly can attest. I really think that if you're there just sort of imagining what he might be imagining, which mothers do anyway, I think that might help, at least help, not escalate it so quickly. But who knows? I mean, no one does know.
A lot of it is the difference between proprioceptive input and other sorts of input. Proprioceptive exercise, moving around, being able to jump and move and wobble. With Kian, especially if you put anything in the screen.
Yeah, that's what Temple Grandin.
Yeah, those things.
Yes.
Temple Grandin. They're getting a lot of input, not a lot of output.
Right.
And their body gets overwhelmed with all of the stimuli, and they have to get it out texturally or skeletal muscle. So Kian just needs a lot more physical activity than most kids.
Yeah. I understand.
I want to say something that I don't want it to sound too simple and too easy, but it's something I know you already know, and that a child like Kian, to me, is a joy as well as challenging, but it's a joy in the way he sees the world and the way things that he brings. I remember the first day he walked through the door. He barely got into the door, right? And I got to introduce myself, and he said, "I just want you to know I'm not a Christian."
It's definitely not spoken.
Well, I was great. We're going to get along great.
He routinely gets in trouble at school for calling the administration out for not feeding them more healthy food, or for telling a kid that his joke was racist, or no, you can't say that because that's sexist. Mom, it's cultural appropriation.
What a gift.
It definitely is a gift. It's another layer of challenge for him with his peers. As he ages, hopefully, the rest of the world will catch up.
Wow, well said.
Nick.
How long had he been in preschool before he started the regression that you were talking Was there any specific trigger for that?
Almost immediately. With me, he would do this thing where he would try to bury himself into my stomach. I called it going back to his first home. Like he would stick his head under my shirt, like just try to get as close to. I thought that was cute. It didn't occur to me that was weird. But he was doing that to his daycare teacher. And things like he was intelligent enough that he could read his name on his sleeping mat. And if they moved it anywhere else, he would know. And he would get very angry, almost violently angry because his sleeping mat was moved. I had never had to experience that at home because I never moved his bed. I'm so organized and just kind of control my environment to such an extent that most of these symptoms did.
So really that was tailor-made for his situation without you even realizing it.
Right, exactly. It just felt normal and natural. And so many of the transitions that he had made were so easy that it didn't really make any sense to me that he had problems with transitions. But maybe it was because he had that safety net. He has a very difficult time trusting others.
When we feel our kids, we go to make those transitions. Oh, when I do it this way, it doesn't work, so I do it that way.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. Then, yes, questions? Yes,
Just curious, kind of going back to the topic, how has having that diagnosis and that journey affected you spiritually?
there were days where I was literally on the floor crying all day because I just did not know how I was going to have the strength to deal with this. I had so much pride going into this and so much ignorance. It took a lot of faith in myself and faith in others to pull myself to this point. Especially doing it by myself. When Ken was diagnosed, his dad moved out of state 2 months later. He could not, it was the last straw. He couldn't handle it, he left. He's seen him a couple times since. But it being me and just me alone, it was a great personal journey and a great personal burden, and learning to connect with someone on the level that you need to connect with a child with autism. It made me more able to connect with other humans
Yes.
too, and to understand how my personal struggles, and I don't want to harm the fact that, this has been rough for me, or this has been complicated. For Ken, it is so much worse. Imagine not having control of your own bowels, or not being able to do what everyone else in the room can do. He has really bad self-esteem issues because he sees the other kids able to sit in the classroom, able to learn and to be still, and he can't do it. He wants to. He really does. He can't do it. Yeah.
Two things. I think it's important, though, for you to share what the challenge has been for you. Because there are, for every kid who has autism, there are 2 parents of a kid who has autism. And they need to know what that's like, what that's about, and the challenges and the struggles and the fact that it can be managed, lived through. And also, I'm curious about how it brought you here. Here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that you say that with other parents. New York Times did this absolutely wonderful article about 2 children who were cured of autism. And by cured, I mean they were very carefully taught over several years the strategies that they needed to learn to live in normal society. And that's their ABA therapy.
Which is?
It's behavioral and analytic therapy. It's about putting in input, figuring out what the output is and changing that over time and very carefully creating scaffolding skills. Like, all right, now clap your hands. They don't know how to clap their hands. You clap their hands for them. You clap their hands. You do this until they figure out how to do something as basic as that. Teaching my son to blow his nose took 3 years.
Teaching him to what?
Blow his nose.
Oh, really?
He couldn't understand the difference between breathing in and breathing out.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I would hold tissue in front of him, and I'm like, okay, we're going to push the tissue in the air, and I would do it, and I'd do it for him, and I would do it for him, and it was the most frustrating experience in the world because blowing your nose seems
And so natural. The breath itself. That's astonishing.
But coming here to I don't really have a support system for myself. You know, my mom lives quite a ways away, and I don't have contact with my father. And again, his father left. This is my support system. I know I don't tap you guys in the regard of hanging on to my son. It's more, I, as a parent, haven't given myself enough attention, spiritually, physically, and mentally, than I needed. And this was more for me than it was for him. I needed to connect with other people, and I needed to feel supported, and I needed to feel accepted. You has been a touchstone for me the past year.
You need to go on TV as an ad for the YouTube. That's perfect.